The valve wheel is too hot to touch, even through the leather of my gloves. It radiates a dull, sullen heat that speaks of high pressure and old iron. I stand in the dark of Sub-Basement 9, listening to the archive breathe. It does not hum like the electric ghosts of the old stories. It wheezes. It chugs. It sounds like a dying lung the size of a cathedral. My name is Kale, and I am a splicer. I fix the belts that hold the world together. I do not read them. Reading is for the archivists, up in the dry rooms with their white linen gloves and their sanctioned eyes. Down here, in the steam and the drip, we only care about tension.
The trouble ticket on my clipboard is damp, the ink bleeding into a Rorschach test of bureaucratic urgency. Sector 4, Real 88 Alpha. Torque variance detected. That means the tape is stretching. If the tape stretches, history distorts. If history distorts, the truth becomes a lie, and the ministry has to send people out to correct the citizens who remember the wrong version. It is better to fix the tape. I unlatch the bulkhead door. The smell hits me instantly. It is the signature scent of the archive. Ozone, wet wool, and the sharp, coppery tang of burnt metal. It smells like a nosebleed.
I step inside the cooling chamber. The air here is 90% humidity. Condensation runs down the riveted steel walls like sweat. In the center of the room, the drive assembly towers over me, a monolith of brass gears and spinning flywheels. And there, submerged in the central tank, is the reel. It is massive, a spool the size of a tractor tire, spinning in a bath of distilled, deionized water. We have to play the tapes underwater. The friction of the magnetic heads against the high-density polymer creates enough heat to melt air-cooled plastic in seconds. The water boils around the reed head, creating a cavitation wake that muffles the scream of the data. I approach the tank. The water is murky, swirling with rust particles and shed oxide. I can see the tape whipping through the guides. It's vibrating, a bad vibration, a wobble in the timeline. My head gives a warning throb, just a little spike of pain behind the left eye. It happens every time I get too close to a corrupted reel. The old-timers say it's just the infrasound, the low-frequency rumble of the machinery resonating in the skull. I reach for the manual brake lever. I have to slow it down to inspect the splice. I haul back on the iron bar. The gears protest, grinding steel on steel. The water in the tank churns violently. The reel slows. The water settles, bubbling softly. I lean over the rim of the tank, peering through the glass observation port. I switch on my headlamp. The beam cuts through the suspension fluid and lights up the tape. It's a wide ribbon, black as oil, 3 inches across. I see the problem immediately. There is a physical warp in the substrate at meter marker 4000. It looks like a scar. I check the gauges. Pressure is stable. I have to go in. Protocol demands I drain the tank, but draining takes an hour, and the ticket is stamped urgent. I strip off my right glove. My hand goes into the water. It is hot, scalding, but bearable. I run my fingers along the submerged tape. This is forbidden, strictly speaking. Skin oil degrades the magnetic flux. But I need to feel the texture. I need to know if this is a structural failure or a manufacturing defect. My fingertips graze the black ribbon. The headache flares, blindingly bright, a white spike driving into my temple. I stumble back, gasping, shaking water from my hand. The smell of burning metal floods my sinuses, overpowering the damp room. For a second, I taste blood. I steady myself against the railing. This is somatic resonance, the hazards of the trade. They say the magnetic fields down here are strong enough to rearrange the iron in your blood cells. I look at the tape again. The warp is pulsing. Not physically, but visually, as if the darkness of the oxide is shifting. I need to excise the damaged section and splice in a blank leader. That is the procedure. Cut out the rot, bridge the gap. The narrative must remain continuous, even if it is empty. I grab the splicing block and the ceramic cutter.
I pull the slack loop of tape up out of the water, locking it into the maintenance vise. The wet tape gleams under my light. I lean in close. The texture is wrong. Standard ministry tape is smooth, a perfect industrial polymer. This section, the damaged part, is rough, micro-textured. It has ridges, like a fingerprint or goosebumps. I run the ceramic blade along the edge, preparing to slice. The headache returns, but this time it brings a passenger, a sound, not from the room, from inside the pane. A bicycle bell, clear as day, a blue bicycle bell ringing twice. I freeze. I haven't ridden a bicycle in 20 years, not since the fuel crisis, not since the private ownership of transport was suspended for the greater good. Why am I hearing a bicycle? I look at the tape. The water dripping from it is staining the splicing block red. Rust. It must be rust. I wipe it with a rag. The red smear remains. It looks biological. It looks like hemoglobin.
I should call the overseer. I should crank the emergency handle and flood the room with nitrogen and walk away. That is what a good technician does. A good technician replaces the part. He does not ask why the part is bleeding. But the pain in my head is a tether. It is pulling me toward the black ribbon. I lower my face to the tape. I can hear the magnetic chatter, a high-pitched mosquito whine coming off the surface. I close my eyes. The bicycle bell rings again. Then the smell of rain on hot asphalt, the feeling of a small hand gripping my pinky finger.
I snap my eyes open. I am breathing hard. These are hallucinations, oxygen deprivation. The ventilation down here is garbage. But the hand, I felt the grip. I look at the label printed on the edge of the tape, expecting the usual batch number and date. The serial number is standard, Sector 4, Real 88 Alpha, year 2038. But underneath, in the smallest font imaginable, stamped into the polymer itself, is a donor code, D7734. I know that number. I see it every morning when I swipe my badge at the security gate. That is my employee ID.
I drop the cutter. It clatters onto the metal grating, loud as a gunshot. I back away from the vise. My ID is on the tape, not as the technician, as the source material. I look at the water tank, the massive spool winding endlessly into the dark. They told us the digital crash wiped out the cloud. They told us we had to rebuild history from physical media, from the reliable, tangible weight of gears and steam. They didn't say where they got the magnetic material. They didn't say how they filled the gaps in the timeline when the servers died.
I try to think back to 2038, the year on the reel. I was here, working. I remember working. I remember the steam. I remember the soup in the canteen. What else? I tried to push past the canteen. Where did I sleep? Who did I go home to? There is nothing, just a gray wall, a static hiss, the same hiss that comes from a blank tape. I look at the black ribbon clamped in the vise. That isn't data. That isn't a speech by the minister or a record of grain yields. That is a Tuesday in November. That is the smell of a woman's hair. That is the sound of my daughter's bicycle.
The realization hits me with the force of a steam hammer. The headache isn't a reaction to the magnetic field. It is a phantom limb pain. My brain is trying to connect to a part of itself that has been excised, flattened, and wound onto a spool to serve the state. They didn't just digitize us, they cannibalized us. When the truth ran out, they used our memories as mortar for the bricks. I used to wonder why the archivists were so cold, why they seemed to have no interior lives. Now I know. They gave them up to keep the record straight.
I pick up the cutter. My hand is shaking, but the pain behind my eyes has stopped. It has been replaced by a cold, hollow clarity. I have a choice. I can splice the tape. I can cut out the damaged section, the section where the memory is fighting against the format, where the blue bicycle is trying to ring through the state propaganda. and I can throw it in the incinerator. I can cure the headache. I can go back to the canteen and eat the soup and remember nothing but the steam.
Or I can let it play, the wobble in the timeline, the distortion. If I release the brake, if I let this warped, bleeding piece of soul run through the reed head, it will broadcast. It will go up the heavy copper cables, through the amplifiers, and into the speakers of the Hall of Records. For 1 second, in the middle of the morning announcement, the entire nation will smell rain on asphalt. They will feel a small hand. They will know that the history they are being fed is made of meat.
I look at the water. It is dark and deep. I look at the tape. I grab the manual crank. I do not cut. I do not splice. I tighten the tension. I engage the drive. The gears shriek. The water boils. The tape begins to move, pulling my past into the machine's present. I stand back and wait for the alarm, wait for the doors to burst open, wait for the truth to tear the system apart from the inside. The headache is gone. The bicycle is ringing.